Prince Harry is pushing harder than ever, using security fears, emotional pressure, and even the Invictus Games to force King Charles into an impossible corner. And now, Meghan Markle's reported demands for full royal-level protection are raising alarm bells inside Buckingham Palace. The crisis now confronting King Charles III did not erupt overnight. It has been years in the making, shaped by legal battles, personal grievances, shifting public sentiment, and a slow but unmistakable escalation that has transformed a family dispute into a constitutional dilemma. What began as a disagreement over police protection has evolved into one of the most sensitive and potentially destabilizing challenges of Charles's reign, placing the monarch at the intersection of duty, law, and deeply personal emotion. At the center of the storm stand Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, whose departure from royal life in 2020 was framed as an act of independence but has since become entangled in a relentless campaign over security, status, and perceived injustice. According to royal insiders, this campaign has entered a new and more aggressive phase, one that no longer relies solely on the courts or public sympathy, but increasingly seeks to exert pressure directly on the king himself. This week, royal commentators Kinsey Schofield and Rupert Bell gave voice to what many within palace walls have been privately acknowledging for months. The Sussex security dispute is no longer contained. It is expanding, politically, emotionally, and symbolically, at a moment when the monarchy can least afford instability. The timing could hardly be worse. King Charles is navigating a reign defined by transition, public scrutiny, and the need to project steadiness after the long shadow of Queen Elizabeth II. At the same time, the Princess of Wales has been quietly reshaping the public face of royal leadership through increased engagements and a composed, duty-first approach that has won widespread approval. Against this backdrop, the Sussex strategy, intense, emotional, and confrontational, stands in stark contrast. The question now facing the palace is not simply whether Harry and Meghan feel unsafe in the United Kingdom. It is whether the monarchy can allow personal narratives to override institutional rules without undermining the very foundations on which it rests. Prince Harry's fight for UK police protection has been framed by his supporters as a matter of life and death, rooted in trauma and history. He has repeatedly invoked the legacy of Princess Diana, arguing that the same forces which pursued his mother continue to threaten him, his wife, and his children. In court filings and public statements, Harry has described himself as uniquely vulnerable, caught between royal notoriety and strict protection. Yet the British government, supported by judicial rulings, has taken a firm and consistent position. Publicly funded police protection is allocated based on role, risk assessment, and service to the crown, not lineage alone. When Harry and Meghan ceased to be working royals, their automatic entitlement to such protection ended. This distinction is not merely bureaucratic. It is foundational. If protection were guaranteed by birth alone, it would upend the entire security framework governing public officials, former royals, and private citizens alike. The system is designed precisely to prevent personal influence, especially from the monarch, from determining who receives armed police protection. And this is where the crisis sharpens. Despite repeated legal setbacks, Prince Harry has refused to accept the finality of those decisions. Instead, insiders say the focus has shifted. Rather than persuading the courts, the Sussex strategy increasingly appears aimed at reshaping public perception, and by extension, moral responsibility. The narrative has subtly but unmistakably moved toward the idea that King Charles could intervene if he truly wanted to, and that his refusal to do so is not merely constitutional restraint, but personal rejection. Within royal circles, this framing is viewed as deeply problematic. King Charles does not control the Metropolitan Police. He does not set Home Office policy, and he cannot privately override security committees without triggering a constitutional crisis. Any suggestion that he should do so places him in an impossible position, one that conflates his role as a father with his obligations as head of state. Former palace officials describe the pressure as unprecedented in tone. While previous family disputes have been emotional, this one carries legal, financial, and political consequences that extend far beyond personal reconciliation. One senior aide, speaking on condition of anonymity, described the atmosphere bluntly: This is not about feelings anymore. This is about whether the system holds. Fueling the tension are renewed reports surrounding Meghan Markle and the possibility of a UK return. While there has been no official announcement, royal commentators suggest that any visit, particularly one tied to the Invictus Games, would come with firm security expectations. According to sources close to the matter, Meghan is unwilling to set foot in Britain without guarantees equivalent to those provided to senior working royals. These expectations reportedly include armed police protection, secure motorcades, controlled perimeters, and no reliance on privately funded security teams. In essence, the level of protection once afforded when she was an active duchess representing the crown. For Buckingham Palace, this is where the issue becomes existential. Granting such protection would not merely be a security decision. It would signal a restoration of status without a restoration of duty, a precedent the palace has spent years trying to avoid. The so-called half-in, half-out model was firmly rejected in 2020 precisely because it blurred the line between private life and public privilege. Reintroducing that ambiguity now, critics argue, would reward pressure tactics and undermine the credibility of royal protocol. It would also raise uncomfortable questions about fairness, particularly at a time when working royals shoulder increasing responsibilities under intense scrutiny. Public opinion, once overwhelmingly sympathetic, has also begun to shift. While many acknowledge the reality of security threats faced by high-profile figures, there is growing skepticism about the Sussexes' approach. Polling analysts note a widening gap between concern for safety and frustration with what some perceive as entitlement. Harry's decision to leave the UK, criticize royal life in interviews and memoirs, and establish a new existence in California has complicated his case in the court of public opinion. For critics, the contradiction is difficult to ignore. A rejection of royal constraints paired with an insistence on royal-level protection. Even the invocation of Princess Diana, once a powerful emotional anchor, has begun to lose its persuasive force among commentators. Rupert Bell has warned that constant comparisons not only oversimplify Diana's legacy, but risk diminishing its meaning. Diana's struggles unfolded within a very different media, political, and security landscape. To transpose that narrative wholesale onto Meghan Markle, critics argue, does a disservice to history and to other women within the royal family. Most notably, it places Catherine, Princess of Wales, in an unfair and distorted comparison. Catherine has faced relentless scrutiny, personal challenges, and immense pressure, yet has chosen a path defined by discretion and service. Her increasing visibility and calm authority have reinforced a public image of stability, one that sharply contrasts with the Sussex narrative of grievance and confrontation. Inside the palace, this contrast is impossible to ignore. Advisors are acutely aware that public trust in the monarchy depends not on emotional appeals, but on consistency, restraint, and adherence to principle. Any perception that rules bend for those who apply enough pressure could be devastating. What makes the current moment so dangerous is the convergence of these forces. Legal avenues have narrowed. Public patience is thinning. And the emotional stakes are being raised ever higher. Insiders describe King Charles as deeply torn. As a father, he is said to feel the pain of estrangement acutely. As a monarch, he understands that his personal feelings cannot dictate public policy. Those close to him insist that he remains committed to the idea that the institution must be protected, even if that means enduring accusations of coldness or indifference. Yet the pressure is intensifying. According to sources, the Sussex camp believes the issue has not yet reached its tipping point. And looming on the horizon is a move that many palace aides privately fear could push the situation into entirely new territory, an invitation framed as reconciliation, unity, and goodwill, but one that may in fact force the king into the most perilous choice of his reign. That invitation, tied to the Invictus Games, has not yet been formally addressed. But within royal circles, it is already being discussed in hushed, urgent tones, as a potential catalyst for escalation rather than healing. And, if insiders are correct, the next phase of this saga will not be confined to courtrooms or commentary panels. It will unfold on the global stage, with the monarchy's authority, neutrality, and future credibility hanging in the balance. What palace aides fear most is not confrontation, but optics. And few optics are more dangerous for a constitutional monarchy than a sovereign appearing to be cornered, emotionally, politically, or symbolically, by his own son. Yet that is precisely the scenario now unfolding as Prince Harry's security campaign enters its most consequential phase, one centered not on the courts or the press, but on an invitation that, on its surface, appears generous and conciliatory. According to royal commentators and sources close to the situation, Prince Harry has explored the idea of inviting King Charles III to formally open the Invictus Games, the international sporting event he founded to support wounded service members and veterans. Publicly, such a move could be framed as an olive branch, a gesture of unity and a powerful image of reconciliation between father and son. Privately, however, palace insiders view the proposal with deep unease. The concern is not the Invictus Games themselves, which remain widely respected and supported across political and royal circles. The concern is context. At a moment when Prince Harry is actively engaged in legal and public battles over UK security, any appearance by the king risks being interpreted as tacit endorsement, not only of the Games, but of the broader Sussex narrative surrounding entitlement, grievance, and perceived injustice. For King Charles, the dilemma is acute. Accept the invitation, and he risks undermining the government's position that security decisions must remain independent of royal influence. Decline, and he opens himself to accusations of emotional coldness, family rejection, or even retaliation against his younger son. In either case, the monarch becomes the story, precisely the outcome palace strategists are determined to avoid. Senior aides are reportedly wary of what one source described as emotional leverage disguised as reconciliation. While there is no suggestion that Harry intends manipulation, the effect, they argue, would be the same, placing the king in a position where personal compassion could be construed as political interference. This fear is compounded by the international nature of the Invictus Games. Any appearance by King Charles would be broadcast globally, analyzed by commentators, and inevitably linked to the ongoing security dispute. Images of father and son together would be interpreted as signals, whether intended or not, that the rift is healing, that the palace is softening, or that concessions may be forthcoming. That perception alone could destabilize the palace's carefully maintained stance of neutrality. Within Buckingham Palace, officials stress that the monarchy cannot be seen as negotiating under pressure. The institution's power lies in its restraint, its predictability, and its adherence to established rules. Once exceptions are made based on emotion, precedent collapses. Yet the Sussex camp appears convinced that public sympathy remains a viable tool. Supporters argue that Harry's security concerns are not abstract. Threat assessments, they claim, demonstrate genuine risk. The Duke's status as the son of the king, coupled with global notoriety and unresolved hostility, creates a unique security profile that cannot be easily dismissed. Critics counter that risk alone does not justify special treatment, particularly when alternatives exist. The Home Office has consistently maintained that bespoke, case-by-case arrangements can be made when Harry visits the UK without granting blanket, taxpayer-funded protection. That solution, however, has been rejected by Harry as inadequate and unsafe. This impasse has led some observers to conclude that the dispute is no longer about logistics, but principle. For Harry, it is about acknowledgement of his fears, his history, and his belief that the institution failed him and his mother. For the palace, it is about maintaining a boundary that separates private pain from public governance. As the standoff deepens, the contrast between the Sussex approach and the trajectory of the working royals has become increasingly pronounced. Catherine, Princess of Wales, continues to expand her public role with a focus on stability, continuity, and service. Her leadership style, quiet, disciplined, and forward-looking, has earned praise precisely because it avoids public confrontation. Royal analysts note that this divergence has reshaped public perception. Where Catherine is seen as embodying the future of the monarchy, the Sussexes are increasingly viewed through the lens of disruption. That shift has significant implications for how their demands are received both within the palace and among the public. polls suggest that while compassion for Harry as an individual remains, support for his security campaign has waned. Many Britons appear to accept the argument that royal privileges must be balanced by responsibility, and that stepping away from official duties necessarily entails a reduction in state-funded benefits. For King Charles, these dynamics create an agonizing calculus. He must weigh his desire for familial reconciliation against the risk of institutional damage. Those close to him insist that he understands the long-term consequences of any misstep. Unlike previous monarchs, Charles ascended the throne in an era of heightened transparency and diminished deference. Every decision is scrutinized, every gesture decoded. Sources describe a king acutely aware that his reign will be judged not only on warmth and accessibility, but on his ability to preserve the monarchy's constitutional role. In this context, bending to pressure, however emotionally compelling, could prove catastrophic. There is also the question of precedent beyond the Sussexes. If Harry's campaign succeeds, what message does that send to other non-working royals, former officials, or high-profile individuals seeking state protection? The security framework exists precisely to prevent such a cascade of claims. Behind closed doors, discussions have reportedly turned to containment rather than resolution. Palace officials are said to be preparing for the possibility that the rift with Harry may not heal in the near term, and that clarity, rather than compromise, may be the only viable path forward. This does not mean reconciliation is impossible, but insiders emphasize that it cannot come at the expense of principle. Any healing, they argue, must occur within the boundaries of law and protocol, not through public pressure or symbolic gambits. As the Invictus Games approach and speculation intensifies, the palace faces a critical juncture. The decisions made in the coming months will shape not only the Sussex relationship with the crown, but the public's understanding of where the monarchy draws its lines. What began as a personal security dispute has become a test of royal authority in the modern age. It has forced uncomfortable questions into the open. How much should personal trauma influence public policy? Where does compassion end and precedent begin? And can a monarchy built on tradition adapt without unraveling? For Prince Harry, the campaign has always been framed as a fight for safety and dignity. For King Charles, it has become a lesson in the limits of power, even for a sovereign. As this chapter closes, one truth has become inescapable within royal circles. There are no easy victories left. Any outcome will leave scars on family bonds, on public trust, and on the image of a monarchy struggling to balance humanity with history. The security drama has not merely tested relationships. It has exposed the fragile fault lines of a modern crown, navigating an era where private pain plays out on a global stage, and where every decision carries consequences far beyond the walls of the palace. Whether reconciliation or rupture awaits remains uncertain, but insiders agree on one point with rare unanimity: the monarchy will not emerge unchanged, and neither will Prince Harry.